Alright, in my last video I briefly showed off a cool little seed I got when getting footage for Minecraft. It has a floating pillager outpost. And to my surprise, a ton of people asked for the seed in the comments. But the seed's right there in the pinned comment, you guys. Literally the first comment you can ever see. You guys, it's right there. Granted, I know I should have put it directly in the video, but I honestly didn't think anyone would really care about the seed. So here's the seed. Go crazy or don't. Anyhow, let's start off by adding to some stuff from the last video. First, Alex Parpada gives a method to mine on the train tracks from the Spirit Track stage. In my last video I mentioned how attempting to mine on the train tracks here would give you no materials. However, Alex mentions how using certain final smashes, like Inklings, will freeze the stage, and thus the tracks, allowing you to stand on them. And if we mine it when it's frozen, like this, we can see that the tracks give you iron-based materials. So you can mine the tracks, I guess they just move out of reach way too quickly under normal circumstances. Which I guess is just different from how the roads work on, say, Port Town Arrow Dive. Also, remember that little tidbit about Inkling freezing the stage. We'll be using that later in this video. Next, in my last video I mentioned how falling with your anvil will put you in a pseudo-grounded state, in which you can be affected by the POW block. Austin R asks what happens if someone then uses a pitfall on you. If you're normally standing on your anvil after it's already landed, you'll of course be grounded on it, like I expected. However, if you get hit with the pitfall as you're falling on the anvil, you actually stay grounded during its descent too. So if you ever catch a Steve player about to use down air off stage and have either a pitfall or any aerial berry move, this will forcefully drag them to the bottom blast zone. And it does work with the pitfall from below, which makes it a bit easier. Fittingly, Arceus does not spike Steve when he's falling from his down air, which is a really nice way to save yourself from getting KO'd off stage if you're too far out to build. Quick tangent, but using the infinite portal setup I've applied in past tests, we can see that Steve's anvil is not, in fact, infinite. It'll disappear after a short period of time regardless of whether or not it hits a blast zone. One more Steve thing before we move on. You know how Steve will pull out and use a bed when he falls asleep normally? Well, when I was live streaming the direct for him, I believe someone brought up the idea of Steve sleeping in the air. The way sleeping works is that every character has their own animation from when they just sleep on the ground. However, whenever a character falls asleep in the air, what they do is just sorta fall to the ground. And once they land, they stay in the same position that they would if they missed a tech. And as you can see with Steve, while he normally just places a bed down, when he falls asleep in the air and when he lands, there's no bed in sight. And like I said, this animation is the same as when he lands on the ground, like so. And now here's a few neat little trivia facts about the sleeping mechanic. First, it seems that the amount of time it takes for you to wake up will be lower if you fall asleep in the air. I mean this in two ways. One being that the wake up animation is just straight up shorter compared to the normal wake up animation, though I imagine this varies slightly from character to character, as it's basically their get up animation. But I also mean this literally. I did 2 snooze tests with Ness at 999% and right up against Hero. Grounded snooze made Ness sleep for a whopping 50 seconds with no mashing, while aerial snooze made Ness sleep for only about 30 seconds with no mashing. An entire 20-second difference here between the two sleep types. So your main takeaway should be that if you made your opponent fall asleep in the air, they will be defenseless for a much shorter time compared to if you make them fall asleep while grounded. And the next piece of pointless trivia is that the direction your sleeping animation will take place, at least with snooze, doesn't depend on where you're facing before you get hit, but rather from which direction you get hit from. So if you get hit from the right, you'll sleep facing right. The same is true for when it gets reflected too. So I guess that's a neat little fact to forget about in 2 minutes. Also, before I switch off Ness, I want to point out something I noticed when getting footage for my last video. But look at the combo counter right here. With no staling on, PK Thunder Tackle does a clean 30%, and everything matches up here, right? But when I turn staling on, meaning the move now has the freshness bonus, and when I land it, it does 31.5% total damage. But for some reason, the damage bar at the bottom says 31.4% instead. And I don't think it should be a case of the actual number being like 31.45% or whatever, since the base damage is definitely 30%, and multiplying that by the freshness bonus, which is 1.05, gives us exactly 31.5%. and all of the damage is applied on the same frame. So I guess the game is just marking down the damage incorrectly here, or something else that would require more coding skills to dissect and learn about. Anyhow, that was one tangent after another, so let's keep at it. Did you know that statistically speaking, you're not subscribed to me? I mean, you don't have to do anything about it, I'm just telling you. Also, 8-Bit Abra tells me something goofy about Lucas in training mode. If you set the Lucas CPU to, well, CPU, then make the game speed be half and get him off stage, he'll just completely fail at recovering. Assuming he's far away enough to where he just can't use Rope Snake. I tried this out with the level 9 CPU as well, and they still have trouble properly using PK Thunder. Though I did see that at some certain angles they could use it, but generally they fail. So if you're ever fighting a CPU Lucas in training mode and they just keep recovering, you can turn the game speed down to ruin their PK Thunder. And I tested this with Ness as well, but he was able to recover generally fine enough. He was at least able to make the PK Thunder connect. This might be because the angles in which you go when you get hit by the PK Thunder do differ very slightly between the two characters. At least this is something that I feel when I play Ness and then switch to Lucas, or vice versa. I almost feel like I have to hit the character at a different location to get the same angle between the two. Oh, and since I'm here, did you know that a little red arrow would appear by your character when your PK Thunder is about to hit them? As you can imagine, this indicates which direction and angle your character will launch. I don't personally think it's very helpful, since by the time you may realize your angle is wrong, it's way too late to change it. That kind of stuff is more of a muscle memory thing, but it's still neat. Oh wait, going back to failed recoveries, DJKD gives me a certain fact about Inkling's recovery in Bayonetta's Final Smash. Now, I was gonna try to use the training mode stage for this test, but the grid in the background gets blocked out by Bayonetta's Final Smash, so I can't really use it as a measurement. So I'm just gonna eyeball it. Normally, Inkling's recovery is super good. I can usually reach the ledge just fine when using up special once I start to get off screen. But when Bayonetta activates her Final Smash, slowing everyone down, when I use up special at around the same distance away from the ledge, I just can't make it. If I had to describe it, it's almost like Inkling just ends up hitting her head on some sort of invisible ceiling. Or better yet, it's almost like some sort of entity is dragging her downwards. What's especially odd though is that I didn't notice anything like this happening with the timer item, even with the super duper slow backfire version. I also didn't notice her recovery being affected when I put training mode at 1/4 speed. So for some odd reason, it seems to be some sort of effect with Bayonetta's Final Smash, not necessarily to slow down specifically. However, when I tested other recoveries like Toon Link's or Mario's or Fox's, I noticed no effect like this taking place. There may be other examples out there, but it seems like Inkling is just oddly singled out in this phenomenon. If anyone has any ideas of why this might be happening, feel free to leave your comments. Moving on, Nicholas Pace gives a really neat fact about the classic mode Mural. That is, every non-DLC character in the game appears on this mural, but representing Corrin is not the default male version, but rather the female version. This is the only instance of a character's default form not appearing on this mural. Everyone else appears as they do when you initially select them on the character selection screen. I'm not really sure why they did this particularly for Corrin. Maybe Sakurai has a few preferences in place? I mean, I can't say I blame the guy, but it's pretty neat to know regardless. Next, O gives me a fact about Rob's side special. That is, apparently his side special actually goes farther the faster you are. You can see a slight difference between me using it here normally, and then using it with the bunny hood on. However, when I apply some lightweight spirits and then attach the bunny hood, the distance is even farther. Especially when I eat food to gain a short speed boost. This didn't seem like the type of move that would be affected by Rob's core speed, but I guess it makes sense in hindsight. But I didn't notice a difference of damage between using it with no bunny hood and with a bunny hood here. So with the added distance doesn't come more spins or therefore more power. But you can make the argument that it's stronger the faster you are, as you will drag the opponents with you. So if you go farther, then technically your opponent gets launched farther. Oh, and this was something that I noticed at some point while playing, but did you know that the light at the bottom of the respawn platform will change? It'll go from blue to yellow to red to deep blinking red before the player is forced off. It's definitely not an incredibly obvious feature, but once you notice it, it's kinda hard to miss. I'm not sure if this could actually come in handy, but you know. Speaking of knowing things, Tony gives me a fact about Pit's Final Smash and the Mushroom Kingdom pipes. Remember how at the beginning of the video I used Inkling's Final Smash to essentially pause the Spirit Track stage? Well, Pit's Final Smash will do that too. As you can see, the Piranha Plant is not moving, and when I hit the POW block, it remains active well afterwards. You'll also notice that you cannot go through the pipes at all. This means these are also paused. So, if you time it right, going into these pipes when the Final Smash gets activated means you can't get out of the pipes since, they're paused, essentially granting you full immunity. Now the timing is a bit specific. Too early and you just won't be able to get into the pipe. Too late and you'll have gone through the pipe, rendering it useless. But it can still happen. And despite what Tony said, this can be applied to much more than just Pit. Again, it'll work with Inkling, whose Final Smash freezes the stage, but it can also work against Zelda. I know it's a bit of a niche environment, but anything that completely negates Zelda's Final Smash is very cathartic. Now, freezing the stage is a necessary factor, I believe. The Dragoon won't have anyone staying in the pipes because it doesn't freeze anything, even if it looks and functions similarly to Pit's Final Smash. Speaking of Pit, Merlin gives me a nice little detail about Pit's down taunt. That is, Pit's down taunt actually has two variants, one where his bow is detached, and another where it's not. His other taunts forcefully detach the bow if it wasn't before, but if you use something like a neutral air beforehand, or if Pit automatically reattaches the bow in an idle animation, the down taunt will reflect that. Functionally, there's no difference. And even though Dark Pit's down taunt is different, the same rules apply. Speaking of Dark Pit though, Bald Martin gave me an interesting fact regarding Dark Pit's arrows. That is, they seem to have a really difficult time destroying the bomb blocks. Now, it doesn't seem to be impossible, but usually the arrows do nothing. I believe there are some specific powers and distances in which it does work, but it's hard to pinpoint why this may be, as the arrows should just destroy the bomb blocks no matter what, right? I also had trouble with Pit's arrows too, by the way. I almost felt like it was easier with Pit, but overall they both had their troubles in breaking the bomb blocks. Compare this to a character like Byleth, or Toon Link, whose arrows destroy the bomb blocks every single time with ease. I'm not sure what property it is about the Pit arrows that caused this difficulty, but it seems pretty odd nonetheless. And I think that'll be where we end it today, mostly because I want to spend these last few minutes talking about some current event stuff, so stick around if you want to hear my hot takes. Before that, I'd like to thank my patrons Felipe Morla, Skully, Avenkaru, Burbo, Raighne, Feurolant, Amon Sharif, Stan Luna, and Zamari. Now, the current event stuff I'm referring to might be obvious if you keep in the loop with general gaming news, especially Smash news. For a quick summary, basically Nintendo gave a huge Smash tournament called The Big House a cease and desist, due to the fact that the version of Melee being used is a slightly modified version of the core game, in order to make net play work. I'll link a few videos in the description that you can watch to get more information about these topics, but there are two specific defenses I see a lot in various threads and comment sections I just briefly want to counter. First being the defense that what Nintendo is doing is legal or within their rights. I don't think anyone is arguing on the legality of all this. This would be an insanely different issue if so. What's being discussed is the morality of this. I'm technically within my rights to call everyone I meet a stupid dumb idiot. Does that make it a good thing to do? Just because something is legal doesn't make it morally acceptable. People are more than free to question the actions of Nintendo in this regard, even if it's legal. If we based morality exclusively off of laws, then laws would never change because our morality could never go outside of them. That's obviously not how it works. So I don't want to see any comments saying, well, they're within their rights, so... because that means absolutely nothing in arguments of morality and ethics, which is what this is. Next is the idea that we don't deserve Nintendo being nice to us or whatever. It may sound completely absurd, but I've seen plenty of people claim that Nintendo might treat the competitive communities better if they quote-unquote acted better. All I can say is no. That's stupid. If we were the most wholesome 100 Chungus community of all time, Nintendo's actions would not change. I guarantee that. Why? Because every community that's gigantic is quote-unquote terrible. We've had some difficult times lately, but we're getting through them as any gigantic community might. If corporations look to the toxic minority of their communities to decide how they treated them, no corporations would do anything for anyone, okay? You may think you know enough about the community to come to conclusions like, it's the worst community out there, and all that, but let me tell you that you don't. You're seeing the tip of the iceberg through the lens of a news reporter. Don't project your disdain of the community on the decisions of Nintendo. Overall, recognize that people have a reason to be unhappy with how Nintendo has been acting lately, especially in this regard. And please try to realize that being unhappy with certain actions doesn't mean discrediting all actions. You can love Nintendo's games and all that, but still criticize how they handle other aspects. Even if you don't care much about them, others might, and you should respect that. Nintendo undoubtedly has been making some terrible decisions as of late, and people have every right to be unhappy with them. That's business, baby. I had an entire script for an entire video on this topic. I might link that in the description if you want to read it. But I decided I didn't really want to have like news reports be a focus of this channel. So those are my core thoughts. Thanks for listening if you did, and leave your own thoughts if you have them. Stay casual, and I'll see y'all later.